In 2016, my guest today, Johannah, faced the darkest winter of her life after the unimaginable loss of her young son. She discovered that when the mind is trapped in a loop of profound sorrow, the body can sometimes find a way forward. Through the endurance of running marathons, she found sanctuary for her grief, proving that we don't run to escape our pain, but to move through it. Today, Johannah joins me to share her journey from absolute heartbreak to founding the Ray of Sunshine Foundation. This is a conversation about loss, resilience, and the beautiful, fierce ways in which we learn to carry our love forward. Welcome, Johannah. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me here, Sanjana. It's such a joy to be here. And yeah, it's amazing to hear such things about me. When I think about it, I don't ever feel like, I've done all of this, but turns out that is my reality. So thank you.
It
Thank you for
is,
having me
yeah.
here.
Yeah, and I just want to pause for a moment and express my gratitude, not just for, being here and taking the time, but for trusting me and this platform to, share your story. I know this is very deep and very profound, and your willingness to do this with me means a lot. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, I know, maybe going back to this is not going to be very pleasant, and I apologize
Yeah.
for that. But I think it's important to start where your journey of transformation began, back in 2026. Can you recount what that early experience of grief and pain looked like? What did survival seem like at that time for you? Was it even a possibility?
Sometimes I feel I'm still stuck in 2016. I can't believe I've made it to 2026. When I lost Jared, my 19-month-old son, I felt like my world had just come crumbling down and everything just stopped, right? Like as if nothing was moving forward. I had this disbelief. I'm like, no, this can't be happening to me. Like, how could this happen? And I was like, I'm from the hospital, and I was just calling my dad, I was calling my husband, I'm calling my mom, everybody, like, do something, like, bring my son back, like, you know? And I could hear pain in everybody's voices. No one is helping me. It just felt like I was helpless at that moment. Nobody was able to bring my son back, to the point that I called another doctor and like, you talk to this doctor, tell them, to do the right thing, to bring him back. There must be something that they can do. The initial shock lasted for days. Like, I couldn't believe that my son was lying in a freezer and in a coffin. I carried my son's coffin, and that was by far the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Even now, when I think about it, I can feel, I can literally feel that moment, the heartbreak. And I never realized what the next day was going to be like. My day would begin with tears, end with tears. But in all of this, I also had a 5.5-year-old little girl who had no clue what was happening. And there were days when I was like, okay, I was just really hoping that my mom would sort of like take care of her for some time, because I didn't have answers. She wanted her mama. And I'm like, I was broken, like literally broken. And it would be like, what do I do? I know I've lost my son, but I do have a daughter. A lot of people like, no, you should have another child. I'm like, a child is not something that you replace. It's a being, someone you gave birth to. And that was the biggest advice. They're like, you're still young, you can have another baby, and life would be better for you. And I'm like, no, it's not gonna be that way. And with each and every passing day, it just felt more and more real. It was getting harder and harder and not easier initially. It became more and more real in terms of, okay, he really is gone. He really isn't coming back. And within 3 weeks, we had Christmas. And I'm like, okay, everybody's celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ. Now, what am I going to celebrate? I've lost my son, and God didn't really save my child. So, I was raised in a Christian home where, we went to church every Sunday, going to Sunday school, singing carols was like the best part of Christmas for me. And it didn't feel like that anymore because I lost my son in the month of December. And for me to be able to do something for my daughter for Christmas was also hard. So every
Yeah.
year, it is a struggle for me to put up my Christmas tree. It is a struggle for me to decorate my house, to go out shopping because I know that, okay, this is the time I actually lost my son, but I also have a daughter for whom I need to create memories. So the initial days were absolutely hard. I can't explain just in words, but it was like every breath I was taking was difficult. I also struggled with sleep. I would go to bed and I would wake up with this overwhelming fear that, oh my God, something's going to happen. Something bad is going to happen. Like I had to do something. I had to protect him. And then I wake up just to realize he's already gone. And I, literally cry myself back to sleep. Every morning around 4:30, I was just waking up. I had trouble sleeping. And that was the beginning of all of those troubles. I still struggle to sleep today. And Sunday evenings around this time are usually the hardest for me because I lost him around this time. So Sundays are hard. And I just realized that I really had no clue how to get through each day. I was just taking it day by day. And they say in grief, your days are longer, but your years fly by. And today, here I am, almost at 10 years, and I'm like, I could still relive those moments. That's what every day is like. It's like somebody is just waiting to crush your heart. Like they really are squeezing your heart and they just want to see you in pain. That's what it felt like. Because losing your parents are inevitable, right? Like that's inevitable. When you grow older or as you grow older, you know that that's the eventuality. But to lose a child, it's like you're losing a future. Like I remember when my daughter, when she was little, she always would ask, "Okay, Mama, so when I am 10 years old, how old will Jared be?" I think he'll be 6. Okay, so when I'm 14, how old will he be? You know, so in my head, I had that as a life that was planned, that was chalked out.
Yeah.
And now suddenly it ended. And then it was like I had an entire future that was uncertain. And I love planning. I love to have a system in place. I would like to have a schedule in place, and that messed it all up. So I was dealing with every day. We're like, okay, people say take it one day at a time. Yeah, I am trying, but even that one day is a very difficult day. And that's how it
Yeah.
is till date.
Oh, wow. That's a lot. Again, I'm really sorry that this happened to you and your family. And I know that's not enough. Saying it like you just said, growing up in a Christian household, I think you're grounded in faith, and moments like this can shake that up.
Mm,
I don't
very
know.
true.
Was it like that for you? Did you lean in more to your faith at that point as a means to ground and find stability, or was it the opposite?
I think it was the opposite. Like I was like, God, I was praying to save my son. Why didn't you? And then people told me, maybe this is what God intended. This was God's purpose. I mean, like, why did God choose my life? Like, what have I done to deserve this lesson? Like, what did my little girl do to experience such loss at this age? What have I done so wrong? So you have like, why me? Why my family? And people say that, God gives the toughest battles to those who can bear it. I'm like, hey, I'd rather be weak. I don't want to be the strong one.
Yeah.
And people threw scripture in my face. God had decided everything, and the pastors who came and prayed. I It just made me angrier at one point. I'm like, no. So, God decided, maybe through you, God wants to teach other parents a lesson. And I'm like, why? Why would God choose me to do that? As much as I believe in God and believe in, my upbringing, and there's this anger that I have. So I always tell people it's a fight between God and me. I don't need to explain myself to anybody. And I still stand by that to this day. I still believe that, all right, maybe God had a reason, but I want to know one day. I tried asking God, I'm like, why me? Why did you choose
Yeah.
me for this? So, no, I couldn't lean on God to the point where I question if heaven is even real. Or is it something that we all created because that helps us get through each day? So you have this, okay, you know what? There is heaven. I will see my son again. But what if it's something that we're all telling ourselves? So that's how much my heart aches. So then I would be like in my head, so I asked my mom this as well. Mama, you say I'll see my son again in heaven. So when I go to heaven, will I be the same age that my son last saw me?
Mm.
Or will I be the older person? So which means when I see you, how old will you be in heaven? I was trying to rationalize everything in my head. I know people say it's your spiritual life, it's how your spirit will be, but your heart wants what it wants. I needed more time with my son. I wanted to hold him, hug him, kiss him. That's what I'm still longing for.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I
Well,
make peace with my God one day.
yeah, but like you said, it's a very personal journey. It's something that you hold close to your heart and doesn't need attestation from anyone else. Um, well, I know that this difficult time was compounded by a lot more for you. It didn't end with the one incident, right? You've shared with me that, and it seems quite unfair, but you did have a series of hard events that came after the fact. And I think coming at a time where you're already at your lowest, I can't imagine what that must have been like for you. But can you share a little bit about that and maybe what or who your support system was to help you survive?
I don't think many people even know about this, but you know how it feels when someone you rely on just takes you to the mountaintop to show you the world and then throws you into a bottomless pit where you feel like you're falling every single day. That's what it felt like for me in 6 months after losing my son. I saw a different side to this human that I never knew existed. A side that just had so much hate for me because of what we endured, which is the loss of our son. It wasn't just hate, it was someone wishing me ill. Like you hate somebody, like I don't like that person, and you just walk away, right? That's like the most human thing you can do to somebody. But wanting to actually crush somebody, defame that person, and ruin the peace of mind, that is exactly what I started going through in like 6 months. And in all of this, my parents stood by me. My sister was by my side. These were the only three people I could, call on. And like I could call them my own. And then I'm like, what do I do? I had so many friends who were very temporary, they just wanted the gossip of what was going on. But the moment they would get something, they would just go share updates here, there. It was like God literally was culling out the weeds from my life. That is what I felt. Which is why, like I say, my faith is not completely gone because God heard conversations that I was not part of. So my family got me through it. And in all of this, it was my daughter's face. Like, okay, I've got to do this for my little girl. I've got to show her that, her mom is strong because she can, not that she just doesn't have a choice, but she wants to be strong to show her that women can be strong and that I can go through things even if the whole world was against her. I want to give my daughter that kind of confidence. She sees me, she sees me very real and very raw. I don't hide my tears from her because I want her to know that there's nothing wrong with crying. That's not a sign of weakness. And she has seen how my parents stood by me, by my side. They never let me go. I have a tattoo here. It's like a Tamil Bible verse. Not sure if you could see, but it's here. It's this verse that my dad would always ask me to read. So he didn't know how else to console me when he saw me crying. So you know what they say about loss, especially of that of a child. As a mother, I'm grieving the loss of my son, but my parents were grieving the loss of their grandson as well as their daughter. That's me. They they saw me in so much heartache and they didn't know how to help me. They really were so heartbroken and they were so sad all the time. And both of their health became worse after that. They became diabetic. They were diabetic, but it became, really bad. Their hypertension. Both of them had the exact same issues, and it was shocking. They had kidney disease. Both of them had multi organ failure by the time they passed away. I lost my dad in 2023, and in 19 months, I lost my mom. The one thing that I felt was like my hope, my foundation, I just lost it all. And knowing that my parents were gone and this human just decided to like just abandon us like nothing ever happened. So abandonment is something that I've experienced quite a bit in my life. And it's not just me, it's my daughter as well. No matter what you have for your spouse or your partner, but to walk out on your child, I think is a very heartless thing to do. So,
Yeah, for no fault of that little life, they didn't sign up for it. Yeah, well, honestly, I'm at a loss of words right now because I know we've spoken about it earlier, but just to hear it all encapsulated as a series of, I don't even know what to call it, but a series of misfortune and just pain over and over again. Yeah, it's certainly a lot for one human being to handle it, but yet here you are, and wow, what an inspiration. You've definitely come such a long way, and we'll explore more of that as we go through the conversation. But I know there was one thing that helped you move through this grief, and that was running. I know you talked about starting to run, almost like an escape, maybe, trying to get away from the pain. But since then, it's become so much and such an amazing journey. So let's talk about how that started and where you are with it today.
Running has always been a part of my life. Like I ran 5K, my first 5K when I was in sixth or seventh standard when I was studying in Kunur. It felt so good because running in the mountains is such a beautiful thing. So I always stayed fit. Like even when I went to the gym, I would just like I always see a treadmill. I'm like, I want to run. If I see a little stretch of road, I would like to run there. So, I always liked running, but it was like very short distance at that point. Then I remember, we had these little events in Hyderabad where I've done a couple of them, like 5K events. But after losing Jared, there was this day when it was like a panic attack because I felt like I couldn't breathe and I just needed to get out and get some fresh air. Whenever I was angry or I was feeling a little overwhelmed with heartache, I just put on my shoes and I just ran out. I just ran, saying, okay, I'll be back in 30 minutes. That little escape from, what I was doing at home or what I was feeling at that point made me feel like, okay, I can do this. Eventually, that became my escape for a lot of things. Every time I would get into fights or arguments, and I know that I'm not able to express myself, or, the other person doesn't want to understand me, I just get up and go out running. That was the one thing that I did. It was my little escape because that was like my safe haven. That's what nobody was troubling me, nobody was annoying me. I just plug in my headphones and just go out for a run. And then I'll be like, okay, now I'm thinking, I'll calm down and then get back home. Those little moments of peace eventually compounded to a habit that I have today. Or I wouldn't even call it a habit, it's now a lifestyle for me. It's become more of a lifestyle change. When we first lost Jared, there were different things we tried. We tried drinking. I cut my hair short. I changed my hair color. Tried going to parties, but nothing gave me that the feeling of fulfillment or, okay, you know what, I can do this to deal with my heartache. Nothing ever gave me that purpose as much as running did. So then I found something that I could escape to deal with my heartbreak. Because when I got back home, I was more composed. I was a better person and a better mother to my child. Like she just didn't see me crying all the time. She saw that, okay, mama is doing something. So that is
Yeah.
something that my daughter grew up just seeing. And those little 2 kilometer runs eventually compounded, increased. And the longest distance I have run till date is 51 kilometers. And I do intend to do a 100-kilometer run and maybe in the future run a 100-miler. You never know. So there's also a saying that people who go through heartache make the best endurance athletes because they know we get through each day, we go through the difficult times, and that gives us that purpose, the determination. And because we don't have a choice right now, this translates into our activities as well, where we feel like, okay, you know what? If I can do that, I can do this as well. So that's how I tried different distances in running. And of course, I joined a little community, a small WhatsApp group, because somebody saw me running somewhere and they said, hey, I've seen you running, why don't you join this group? And I'm like, okay, yes, sure. I joined that group. And then there was this one day, so somebody was like, okay, you know what, you run well. You've done a 10K. Why don't you run a half marathon? And I'm like, oh, yeah, really? I'm good. Okay, let me do it. So at that point, I knew nothing about training. I just signed up, I went online. I'm like, I was looking for shoes. And then I'm like, oh, these shoes are fine. This is within my budget. Let me just, okay, these are running shoes and just bought something. And of course, I didn't know anything about sizing and other things. I just bought it. And that just gave me the joy of running a race. And then COVID hit. At that point, my only break that I took was I was like, guys, I'm stepping out for 30 minutes for a run because I've been at home working all day. I would just step out for
Mhm.
those 30 minutes, come back. And I'll be like, all right, bring it on. What challenges do we have? What do we have to resolve right now? It gave me the clarity. So the brain fog, the stress, and everything, this was my escape. But that's
Yeah.
how that one little run changed my entire life, to be very honest. I feel like I'm much better human at this point. So, yeah, that's what running has done for me.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I'm glad. I'm so glad you found something that was able to give you the reset and the bounce back that you needed. And what a beautiful way to show your little girl that, you're back and you're available and you're present, and essentially laying that as a foundation for her to look up to as she's growing up. Wow. Well, I know it didn't stop there. Your runs have now transformed into something more. You run for a cause. There are these different events that you organize. So, at what point do you think that came about? I know you said it started as a very personal journey, right? It was your journey of healing, but then it became more collective, I see, as it evolved over the years. So, what prompted you to make that shift?
Most of these anniversaries are usually very hard. So what I started doing then was I started running on those days to mark those anniversaries. So be it Jared's birthday or be it the anniversary or the day of losing him, I started doing those many years as my distance. So when Jared turned 11 recently, I ran an 11K. But I also do that for my daughter today. Like to next month, she will be turning 15 and I will be running a 15K. So when a year after my dad passed away, when I went for the 1 year anniversary to Kunur, I was reminded during those prayer meetings that we had about everything that my dad did for the people of Kunur. For what I can remember, he donated school books, he donated blankets, he donated the school books, bags were all for the government schools, right? That was in our area there. He donated blankets to the needy. Somebody randomly came up and told me, your dad gave me this watch because I told him I didn't have a watch. Your dad gave me this, when I was really in times of need. He started a clinic in honor of his parents. That was like my grandparents, because there were no hospitals in the area that we were living in. And then he started an ambulance service because there are no ambulances in Connaught that can get to people, or not as many at that point. So when I went there for the 1st year anniversary, I met this boy called Sandy on Instagram. Like, oh, this is runner from Connaught and he's doing really well. I said, hey, Sandy, do you want to run? And he said, sure. So the, on the day of the anniversary, I guess I went for a run with this boy and he introduced me to some of these really, really talented athletes, right? Like they run a 2 hour, 30-minute marathon, whereas I run like 2:30 half marathon. So they're really fast. Okay. And he said, these boys are very good. I said, why don't they come and run Hyderabad marathon? No, Joe, these boys can't afford to travel and register for big races. And I was like, oh my, that's so unfortunate. Okay, let me do something. You just give me the names of these athletes and I'll see what I can do because I would really love for these boys to come and experience, big events like the ones that happen in Hyderabad. And then I spoke to my friend Shrikant and I was telling him, this is what it is. My dad always wanted me to do something for the people of Connor. Why not? I still do the same thing, but in the way that I want to, right? Something that's more close and personal to me. So we decided that we would start supporting athletes, people, especially who are
Okay.
training in Connor and these remote villages. And it just was like, okay, I would reach out to race officials wherever I had contacts. I said, these boys are really talented. Is there something you can do to support them? They were like, okay, send us their details and we'll see what we can do. So I started working with the Hyderabad Race Committee, and I told them about these athletes, and then we tried to get them an entry to come and participate. So then my friend and I started splitting the expenses for their travel, because these boys don't travel because they can't afford to. And it is so heartbreaking, because you'd be like, for them, probably the ticket cost is what, less than 1,000 rupees if they come by train. And that is something that we would
Yeah.
spend if we go to a coffee shop. So we decided, okay, let's start
Mm.
supporting. So we were just making meaningful expenses, where we felt like, okay, let's do
Yeah.
what we can. And that eventually translated to more races, more events, and these boys were thriving, and a couple of girls as well. So that is when we were like, okay, so initially somebody didn't have good shoes. Seven of us got together and bought him these really good racing shoes. And we were like, okay, when
Mm.
people are willing to help, let's make this official. Somewhere at some point, people would think more, maybe more confident in giving to a foundation than just transferring money to my personal account, even though people have actually done it. We just wanted to make this more of a very formal approach. And that is when, we were like, okay, let's do this. So my friend, what he does is, in the month of November, he started his runs called the Movember runs. November is like for men's prostate cancer awareness. What we started doing in the last 2, 3 years, what started as a 50-kilometer run within Hyderabad, we started running from Hyderabad to Warangal. And last year we did Hyderabad to Suryapet, just to raise awareness, raise funds. And we raised close to 3 lakh rupees last year. And we
Wow.
gave checks to M&J cancer patients. We chose 5 patients who were practically, below poverty line. So the doctors helped us identify 5 people, 5 patients, and we went and handed over checks for 50,000 each. So that became a part of our movement as well, something that we wanted to support. And this one is very close to my heart, something that I really find very hard to talk about. So when I lost my son, I didn't know how to perform CPR or how to do the Heimlich. I feel like if I had known, maybe my son had a chance, right? And I wanted to make it a personal mission to teach CPR skills, especially to young parents, to school kids, at least the high school kids, children who are actually aware and, they understand the whole concept of life-saving skills. I learned,
Yeah.
basic life skills and CPR, and I ensure I keep getting myself trained every 2 years so that I'm certified. I made that a part of the foundation, which is why we named our foundation Ray of Sunshine Foundation. And I call my son my sunshine. That's what I used to call him. I used to sing this song, You Are My Sunshine, to him. So, and we also know that, we are like providing a ray of hope to these athletes and,
Mm.
to the cancer patients. It may be a little thing, but I still feel, the ocean would be less without that drop of water, right? It's what it's commonly known as. So these are the 3 different verticals coming together to form the foundation, and something that literally was born from our hearts. So that's how that
I
happened.
don't think it's little, Joanna. I think this is incredible work. It's very important. And the fact that you're doing it and helping so many people. Well, we'll talk a little bit about a different aspect to your life. I know you journal and you write, and that's something that's very important to you as well.
Um, Within a, a couple of weeks of losing Jared, my high school classmate reached out to me on Facebook Messenger, and for some reason, I chose to respond to her. Like, I didn't respond to a lot of messages I got at that point because everybody's like, oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Can I know what happened? It was more about curiosity. And this friend did not.
Yeah.
She wrote to me and she was like, I'm really sorry. I know this must be really hard. But you know what? Why don't you write to your son? She said that. And I was like, wow, what a nice thing to say. She didn't say anything else. And I loved writing. I love on any day, pen and paper. That's like my best friend. If I'm going to meetings, I always have a book and a pen. People were like, you can use notes, you can use
Yeah.
this. I said, but nothing like writing things down, right? So I enjoyed that.
Mhm.
So I bought books and I started writing to my son every single day, night, whenever I felt like it. I felt like
Wow.
I'm able to communicate with Jared. Like, I know he would not be able to read books, but I think I have about 20 books or so that's just filled with my pain, my love, everything that I expressed to my son. And that's how it started. And then suddenly somebody was like, every time you post on social media, I feel your pain. I had this former colleague of mine who reached out to me and said, you know what, Joanna, through your posts, I actually got to know what my mom went through. So when I was little, I lost my younger brother. And I always used to wonder why my mom was sad and why she was always crying. But after reading your posts, I actually can understand what my mother was going through. And she said that her mom actually passed away like a couple of weeks or months prior to her writing to me. And she said, but during her last days, I'd gotten so much closer to her. So it wasn't for me about all the fancy words that I was going to use or how expressive I could be, but it was bringing out true emotion. And I was keeping my posts real because somewhere, even if I was
Yeah.
able to help that one person reconnect with their parent, it felt like I was doing something good. So I kept writing. And then I started something called, the brief journal series and the different lessons that I learned. And every time I would go through the world and see something that was really nice, I'd be like, oh, this is very nice for me to write about. I will write about this. This is something that I talked about. So, in all my ways of volunteering, I always felt that I could write about things. For me, writing is on one side, like you said, personal, and running is that. So I started combining even writing about running sometimes. Like I volunteer with some of these running magazines, and people identify me as, a night owl or someone who runs to manage grief. So that is sort of something that people know. And I have a big tattoo of my son that I flaunt, that I run. So that again becomes a story sometimes.
You've spoken so much about showing up for your daughter and for others. But what would you say to women who struggle to put themselves first, especially when they're carrying grief or caring for someone else?
Well, everybody, especially women, you can't pour from an empty cup. So put yourself first, be it physical health, your emotional health, or mental health. Put yourself first. Like my daughter knows that, I have to go for my run. Otherwise, I could be grumpy. I could be cranky. Simple things, right? So, where I know that if I have to take care of my child, I have to be in good health. Because I know that at one point I lost my parents early. Both of them were 69. If my parents had prioritized their health over just my sadness at what point, I feel I would have been happier. They would have lived longer. So if you want to help somebody, just like how they announce even on flights, you put on your oxygen mask first before you help somebody else. That is what I would say. You be true to yourself. help yourself first, because only when you feel good, you can help others. So I think for me, my identity also would be mainly about, the woman who does what is right, probably, as a mother, as an employee, as a runner. I wear different hats, but it is still the same Joe or Johanna. It's just that every time I wear a different hat, I transform myself to fit that role, but it still has to be me. Be your true, authentic self. I think that is what is more important. And I always advocate for it.
Finally, you said something to me that I want to end on. You said grief is not a taboo. So, what would you say to someone who's afraid to bring up a loved one's loss? Afraid they'll cause more pain by mentioning it?
And now a lot of people are scared to talk to me because they don't want to touch these topics. Um, and I always tell people, I like to tell people about my son, talk about him. It's not a taboo, Grief is something that we all go through, but it's just so happens at different stages of life. I was 31 when I lost him. So thank you for actually talking about this, because I know it's not easy, but you made this conversation uh, very relatable for everybody else too.
We had some technical issues because of which we lost a part of my video and audio during this recording. I just want to take a moment to apologize, firstly to Johannah, because this was not the experience she deserved, but also to all of you for the interruption during the recording. I do want to say thank you for continuing to stay with us during this experience and not letting it take away from the wonderful message that Johannah had to share. Thank you, Johannah, for taking the time, and thank you all for tuning in. I will see you next time.